$60,000 is literally pocket change to you, Kevin. You won't even miss it, my sister Amanda said, leaning back in my office chair as if she owned the place. She smoothed her platinum blonde hair and crossed her legs, showing off a designer handbag that cost more than many people's monthly salary. Beside her, my father Richard nodded approvingly, his small calculating eyes taking in every detail of my panoramic office in downtown Austin, Texas. His grubby hands clutched a local newspaper where my company, TechFlow Solutions, was featured on the front page as one of the fastest-growing startups of the year. A simple little house, nothing fancy, he added, as if he were asking to borrow $20. You've got money to spare in that little computer business of yours. My name is Kevin Chun, and at 29 years old, I never imagined this conversation would happen. Not after 22 years of absolute silence. My father had abandoned me when I was 7, shortly after discovering that my mother was pregnant with Amanda. He simply disappeared one morning, taking half of the family's savings and leaving a 2-line letter about starting a new life. Amanda was born 2 months later, and my mother, devastated by the betrayal, never fully recovered. She worked 3 jobs to support us: cleaning in the morning, sales in the afternoon, night shift. I took on the role of father to Amanda from an early age, changing diapers, preparing bottles, taking her to school when my mother collapsed from exhaustion. Those were brutal years. Nights without dinner, electricity bills cut off, clothes bought at thrift stores. I sold candy at school, mowed lawns on weekends, did whatever odd jobs came my way. All to keep our family afloat while my father lived his new life somewhere else. Amanda grew up spoiled by the little we could give her, but also rebellious. At 15, she found out where our father lived and started meeting him in secret. When I confronted her, she yelled that I wasn't her father and that Richard had promised to give her everything she deserved. He has a company now, Kevin. A construction company. He's going to teach me about business, she said, her eyes shining with admiration. 2 weeks later, she packed her bags and moved into his house. My mother cried for months. I finished high school working even more hours to pay the bills that Amanda helped share. I got a partial scholarship to college, but I had to work in the library, the computer lab, and delivering pizzas to make ends meet. While studying computer science, I developed a project management application that started small but exploded when a few local companies adopted the tool. I graduated with honors and, at 23, turned that simple application into TechFlow Solutions. In 6 years, the company grew from a shared office to 3 floors of a premium commercial building. 42 employees, contracts with national corporations, and a valuation that made me a millionaire on paper. My mother was finally able to stop working. I bought her a house with a garden and the lake view she always dreamed of. She deserved every penny after everything she sacrificed. Amanda and my father? Total silence for years. Until today. So what do you say? Richard insisted, tapping his fingers on the table. It's just a house. You can pay cash. I watched the two of them there, after more than 2 decades, acting as if I owed them something. As if it were natural to show up at my office demanding a fortune. Amanda checked her cell phone and sighed dramatically. Kevin, don't be selfish. Family helps family. If you're enjoying this complicated family story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out what happens when the past knocks on your door demanding the impossible. I kept my expression neutral, but mentally I was already cataloging every word, every gesture. They didn't know it, but this surprise visit would be the biggest mistake of their lives. Do you know how much a decent house costs these days? Amanda continued, adjusting the gold bracelet she wasn't wearing when she still lived with us. $60,000 is literally what you spend on taxes per month. My father nodded vigorously, opening the newspaper and pointing to the article about my company. Look here, Kevin. It says your company is worth $8 million. $8 million. And you're going to deny your little sister a little house. I looked at Richard Chun closely for the first time in over 2 decades. At 54, he had put on weight, his thinning hair revealed an artificially tanned scalp, and his clothes tried to disguise a prominent belly. But it was his eyes that caught my attention. They still had that calculating gleam I remembered from my childhood. You have no idea what we've been through all these years, he said, his voice taking on a tone of lament. My construction company is barely staying afloat. The economy is terrible for small businesses. Amanda rolled her eyes dramatically. Dad's being modest. He has contracts, but you know how it is. The money is slow to come in. That was a lie. I had done my homework before this meeting. Richard Chun Construction was a shell company registered only 3 years ago, with no registered employees and no documented projects. He was living off online gambling and dubious credit card schemes. And I need a place of my own, Kevin, Amanda insisted, crossing her legs and leaning forward. I can't live with Dad forever. I'm 22 years old. I need independence. Independence. The irony was striking. Amanda had never worked a day in her life. Since moving into Richard's house, she had been posting photos on social media pretending to have a luxurious life, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, trips to the beach. All financed by small scams and loans that my father never paid back. Remember how close we were as children, she continued, forcing a nostalgic smile. You always took care of me. Now that you can afford it, why wouldn't you continue to do so? My hands clenched involuntarily. I did remember. I remembered changing her diapers at 8 years old while my mother worked the night shift. I remembered sharing my school lunch sandwich because she was hungry. I remembered lying to teachers about why she was late, dirty, or without school supplies. Your success kind of proves I was right, Richard said, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority. You needed to learn to be independent. Me leaving home forced you to grow up, to become strong. My jaw clenched. He was rewriting history, turning abandonment into parenting strategy. Look at this office, he gestured broadly. Panoramic view, imported furniture, a staff of 40 people. I knew you had potential. Amanda laughed, an artificial sound that echoed through the office. Kevin has always been the brain of the family. I'm more the heart, you know? That's why I need a beautiful home where I can express myself. Express myself. She had spent the last 7 years expressing contempt for the family that raised her, posting mean comments about my mother on social media, and spreading lies about our childhood to anyone who would listen. The house we're looking at is in Westlake, Amanda said, showing photos on her phone. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, small pool. Nothing fancy. 65,000 cash. 65,000 had become 65,000. In 5 minutes, the price had gone up $5,000. And of course, we'd need a small amount for furniture and decor, Richard added casually. About 15,000 should be enough. Now it was $80,000. For a woman who never called me on my birthday and a man who disappeared when I needed him most. Kevin, you're very quiet, Amanda observed, tilting her head. Aren't you happy to see us? Happy. How could I explain that seeing them both there, after so long, made my stomach churn with disgust? How could I explain that their every word was a stab in the heart, reminding me of nights without dinner, cut-off electricity bills, my mother's silent tears? I'm processing, I replied calmly. There's not much to process, Richard laughed. It's a ridiculous amount for someone of your standing. You probably spend that much on corporate lunches. He wasn't entirely wrong about my financial situation. TechFlow had been very successful. But every penny of my net worth represented sleepless nights, weekends spent working, calculated risks, and sacrifices he would never understand. And there's something else, Amanda said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. We're kind of in a delicate situation. The current owner is pushing for an answer by Friday. 5 days. They wanted me to make an $80,000 decision in 5 days. Actually, Richard stood up, walking over to the window. We didn't come here just to ask. We came here to collect. Collect. The word hung in the air like a threat. You owe us this, Kevin, he said, turning to face me. I'm your father. She's your sister. Family is family. That was it. 22 years of total abandonment, and now I was indebted to them. Amanda joined him, forming a united front against me. We don't want to be inconvenient, but we have our rights too. Rights. As if sharing DNA gave them a right to the fruits of my labor. And if you're worried about money, Richard smiled, we can discuss a loan. With low interest, of course. Family helps family. A loan. They knew perfectly well they would never pay a penny back. I kept my expression neutral, but mentally I was already 3 steps ahead. They didn't know I had hired a private investigator as soon as I heard they were asking questions about me in town. They didn't know I had access to financial records, court cases, and an impressive list of people they had cheated. More importantly, they didn't know this conversation was being recorded. "I'll need a few days to think about it," I finally said. Richard smiled triumphantly. "Of course. But remember, only until Friday." As they left my office, Amanda turned around one last time. "Oh, and Kevin? Is Mom okay? It would be a shame if she knew you denied us help after everything we've done for you." A veiled threat against my mother. The last line had been crossed. When the door closed, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. "Mark? It's Kevin. I need you here first thing tomorrow morning. We have a lot of work to do." Mark Sullivan arrived at my office at 7 the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bulky briefcase. At 45, he was the sharpest lawyer I knew, gray hair slicked back, gold-rimmed glasses, and an impeccable reputation for never losing an important case. "So Kevin," he said, sitting down and opening the briefcase, "I spent all night researching your dear relatives. And man, what a Christmas present you gave me." He spread documents across the desk, public records, credit histories, court filings. It was like a mosaic of Richard and Amanda's criminal incompetence. "Your father has 17 default cases in the last 5 years, Mark continued, pointing to a stack of papers. He owes $120,000 on credit cards, $40,000 in personal loans, and still has the audacity to run a shell company to evade taxes. I picked up one of the documents. Richard Chun Construction had reported fictitious losses of $80,000 last year, even though it had no employees or documented projects. "And your sister?" I asked. Mark laughed grimly. "Amanda is even better. She has scammed at least 6 different men in the last 3 years. Promises of marriage, requests for loans for family emergencies, then she would just disappear." He showed me screenshots of online dating profiles where Amanda used fake names: Jessica, Samantha, Caroline. In the photos, she varied between platinum blonde, brunette, and redhead, always wearing expensive clothes she could never afford. 2 of them filed complaints with the police, Mark added. Michael Davidson lost $15,000. Thomas Reed, $22,000. She promised to pay them back, but she moved out of town. My stomach clenched. Was this my sister? The girl I had raised, fed with shared sandwiches, protected from bullies at school? "There's more," Mark said, his voice growing more serious. "They didn't come here by chance, Kevin. Your father hired a private investigator to track down your financial situation." He slid a photo across the table. Richard was sitting in a cheap cafe with a suspicious-looking man, exchanging documents. Greg Hartman, ex-cop fired for taking bribes. Now he works as a freelance investigator for questionable people. He's been digging through your entire life for the past 6 weeks. I felt a cold anger rising in my chest. They had spied on me, catalogued my success as if it were store inventory. Hartman found out about TechFlow, about your mother's apartment, even about the beach house you bought last year. They know exactly how much you're worth. I took out my phone and showed Mark the recording of yesterday's conversation. As he listened, his expression changed from serious to completely furious. "That's pure emotional blackmail," he said when the recording ended. "And the threat to your mother could be considered coercion." At that moment, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Kevin." The voice was Amanda's, but it sounded different, more urgent, almost desperate. "I need to talk to you. It's about Mom." My blood ran cold. What about my mother? "Nothing yet," she said, and I could hear the malicious smile in her voice. "But you know how sensitive she is. It would be terrible if she found out you denied us help after everything the family has done for you." Mark motioned for me to keep recording. "Amanda, what are you talking about?" "Come on, Kevin. Mom always believed you were the perfect son. Imagine if she knew that when the family needed you, you turned your back on us. That you chose money over family." The blackmail was blatant now. No subtleties. "And there's something else," she continued. "Dad found out that Mom has a little problem with medication. Apparently, she was taking anti-anxiety pills without a prescription. It would be a shame if that information reached the proper authorities." My hand gripped the phone so tightly that I thought I would break it. My mother did take medication for anxiety, legally prescribed by Dr. Martinez. But I knew Richard could twist anything. How much? I asked, keeping my voice steady. 80,000 for the house, 15,000 for furniture, and now we need another 5,000 for legal expenses. 100,000 total. $100,000. The price had gone up $20,000 in 24 hours. And we want it by tomorrow, Richard said, taking the phone from Amanda. In cash. No checks or wire transfers that can be traced. Mark nodded, taking frantic notes. Where? I asked. Meet us at 2 o'clock in the parking lot of Sunset Mall. You come alone, bring the money, and never bother us again. The call ended. Mark looked at me with a serious expression. Kevin, this is extortion. A federal crime. We can take them down right now. But I was thinking 3 steps ahead. A simple arrest would be too quick, too easy. They would get out on parole and could still cause problems for my mother. No, I finally said. We're going to give them exactly what they're asking for. Mark looked at me as if I had gone mad. Kevin. But not in the way they expect, I continued, a plan forming in my mind. I want you to find out everything about Hartman, about the men Amanda cheated, about every penny Richard owes. I want names, addresses, phone numbers. If you're following this family extortion story, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how sometimes giving people exactly what they ask for can be the perfect revenge. And I want you to contact the FBI, I added, my voice taking on a coldness I didn't recognize. We have 24 hours to put together the strongest case in history. Mark smiled slowly, understanding my intention. You want to catch them in the act. Not just in the act, I replied, looking out the window at the city that had given me a second chance. I want to catch them in a way that they can never hurt anyone again. While Mark left to organize our strategy, I remained alone in the office, looking at the photos of Amanda scamming innocent men. Men who, like me, had trusted someone in their family. The difference was that they didn't have the opportunity to get revenge. I would. Mark returned 3 hours later with an even thicker folder and an expression that mixed admiration with concern. Kevin, what you have in mind goes far beyond a simple prison sentence, he said, spreading new documents across the table. You want to completely destroy their lives. Exactly. Prison would be temporary. They would be released on parole, continue to scam people, hurt innocent people. I needed something permanent. I found the men Amanda defrauded, Mark continued, pointing to a list of names. Michael Davidson lost $15,000 he had saved for his girlfriend's engagement ring. Thomas Reed used $22,000 from his father's inheritance to help her with a supposed medical emergency. I picked up the photos of the men. Michael looked to be 25, with a shy smile, and worked as a teacher. Thomas was a 31-year-old accountant who looked like he had been raised by his grandparents. Decent men who trusted someone who said she loved them. And there's more, Mark said, his voice growing somber. James Patterson, a 53-year-old widower. Amanda promised to marry him, said she needed $30,000 to pay off her father's debts before the wedding. He sold the old car that had belonged to his late wife. My jaw clenched. Amanda had destroyed the last memory that man had of his wife. They all filed complaints with the police, but she always moved cities before she could be located. The cases remained open due to lack of sufficient evidence. I studied the police reports. Amanda always used the same pattern. She met the men online, built intense relationships for 2 or 3 months, created a convincing family emergency, and disappeared after receiving the money. What about Richard? I asked. His father is even more interesting, Mark smiled grimly. He owes $120,000 to 13 different creditors. But what's most fascinating is that he's pulled off the same shell company scam in 4 different cities over the last 10 years. Mark showed me documents for Richard Chen Construction in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and now Austin. Always the same scheme: register the company, forge contracts, apply for business loans, declare bankruptcy, and move to another city. There's an interesting pattern, Mark continued. He always follows Amanda to the cities where she's running her relationship scams. They work as a team. She identifies targets with money. He creates false documentation to give credibility to her scams. A family operation. How disgusting. What about investigator Hartman? I asked. Greg Hartman is a gift that keeps on giving, Mark laughed. Not only did he illegally dig into your life, he's done it to at least a dozen other people in the last 2 years. Blackmail, extortion, industrial espionage. The FBI has been looking for a way to get him for years. Perfect. My phone rang again. It was Amanda. Kevin, Dad wants to talk to you, she said without preamble. Put him on. Richard's voice sounded arrogant and impatient. Kevin, we've had second thoughts about our financial situation. 100,000 isn't going to be enough. The price had gone up again. We need 150,000, he continued. 120 for the house, 15 for furniture, 15 for legal expenses. It's a fair amount for someone of your stature. $150,000. In 48 hours, they had raised the price by 70,000. And we want it split into 2 installments. Amanda took the phone. 100,000 tomorrow, 50,000 next week. To make sure you don't try anything stupid. They were creating an installment payment scheme, ensuring multiple opportunities for extortion. Kevin, are you there? Richard asked. I am, I replied calmly. Great. And remember, your dear mother can't know about any of this. It would be a shame if she found out her son is so selfish. The call ended. Mark shook his head. They're getting bolder. The more you give in, the more they ask for. Exactly. It was time to implement my strategy. Mark, I want you to do 3 things. First, contact Michael, Thomas, and James. Tell them we found Amanda and that she could be held criminally responsible, but we need their cooperation. Mark quickly took notes. Second, I want a meeting with the FBI special agent in charge of financial crimes. We have enough evidence for a larger operation. And third, I took out my corporate credit card. I want you to withdraw exactly $100,000 in cash. Used bills, serial numbers noted. Mark looked at me confused. Kevin, you're not really going to give them the money. I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for, I replied, a complex plan forming in my mind. But not in the way they expect. If you're following this elaborate revenge strategy, subscribe to the channel to find out how sometimes giving people exactly what they ask for can be the perfect trap. While Mark organized the contacts, I called my assistant, Carol. Carol, I need you to set up a meeting for tomorrow at 3 p.m. location, Sunset Mall parking lot. Participants, me, 2 people I'll specify, and some special observers. Special observers, sir? Federal agents, Carol. And possibly some local journalists. I hung up and looked out the window at the city of Austin. In 24 hours, Richard and Amanda would discover that extorting the wrong person could be the biggest mistake of their lives. My phone rang again. It was my mother. Kevin, dear, I had a strange visitor today. A man claiming to be your father. My blood ran cold. What did he want, Mom? He asked questions about you, about your company. He said you were reconciling. He seemed strange. Richard had gone to my mother. He had crossed the last red line. Mom, listen carefully. If he shows up again, call the police immediately. Don't talk to him, don't let him in. Promise me. Kevin, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm dealing with a problem, Mom. But in 48 hours, you'll never have to worry about it again. When I hung up, Mark was watching me with a serious expression. They've gone too far, I said, my voice taking on a coldness I didn't recognize. Mark nodded. Then let's end this. I spent the night organizing every detail of the operation. It wouldn't just be an arrest for extortion. It would be the complete dismantling of a criminal network that had been operating for years, destroying innocent lives along the way. By the next morning, everything would be ready. Every piece in place, every participant briefed, every exit blocked. Richard and Amanda arrived in Austin looking for an easy victim. They found a predator. At 2 o'clock sharp, I parked my Tesla at Sunset Mall and watched Richard and Amanda arrive in an old noisy pickup truck. They got out of the vehicle with confident expressions, Amanda checking her hair in the side mirror while Richard adjusted the cheap dress shirt he was wearing to try to hide his belly. They didn't know that 3 inconspicuous vans were already strategically positioned around the parking lot, each equipped with federal agents and high-definition cameras. Kevin. Amanda waved dramatically, as if we were old friends reuniting. Punctual as always, little brother. Richard approached with a forced smile, his eyes immediately focusing on the black briefcase I was carrying. We hope you've brought our conversation to a positive conclusion. I brought exactly what you asked for, I replied calmly, placing the briefcase on the hood of my car. Amanda practically jumped with excitement. 100,000, right? As we agreed. 150,000, Richard quickly corrected. Remember? We discussed the additional costs yesterday. I watched the two of them negotiate with me as if they were used car salesmen, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Before we open this, I said, I'd like you to meet some people. Richard frowned. What people? We told you to come alone. At that moment, 3 men emerged from behind the parked cars. Michael Davidson, the professor who had lost $15,000. Thomas Reed, the accountant who had sold his father's inheritance. James Patterson, the widower who had sacrificed his last memento of his wife. Amanda paled instantly, her hands trembling as she recognized the faces. Kevin, what's going on? She whispered. Amanda, Michael said, his voice controlled but laden with emotion. Or should I call you Jessica? That was the name you used when you promised to marry me. Thomas stepped forward. Caroline was the name she used with me. She said she needed $22,000 for her father's emergency surgery. James, the oldest, simply looked at Amanda with sad eyes. Samantha, you convinced me to sell my late wife's car. You said it was to pay off debts before our wedding. Richard tried to move toward the pickup truck, but found the path blocked by a black van. Federal agents emerged from vehicles at 3 different points in the parking lot. Richard Chun, an authoritative voice echoed behind him. It was Special Agent Patricia Mills of the FBI. You are under arrest for extortion, wire fraud, and operating a shell company in multiple states. And Amanda Chun, another agent, approached her. You are under arrest for relationship fraud, identity theft, and extortion. The transformation in their faces was instantaneous. Richard went from arrogant to desperate in seconds. Kevin, this is a misunderstanding. We're family. Family doesn't extort family, I replied, opening the briefcase. Inside, instead of money, were stacks of meticulously organized documents. Bank records, phone call transcripts, evidence of Amanda's scams, receipts from Richard's shell companies. These are copies, I explained calmly. The originals have been with the FBI for 24 hours. Amanda looked around frantically, searching for a non-existent exit. You can't do this. We're your family. Family. Michael laughed bitterly. She told me her father was dying of cancer. She cried real tears while I signed the check. Thomas shook his head. She showed me fake X-rays of brain tumors. I believed every word. James simply handed Amanda a photo. It was her, but with red hair, using the name Samantha. You said you loved me. That you wanted to build a life with me. Richard tried one last desperate gambit. Kevin, think of your mother. This will destroy her. My mother, I replied coldly, is safe in the house I bought for her, protected by a security system I installed yesterday. And she already knows the whole truth. Agent Mills approached with handcuffs. Richard Chun, you have the right to remain silent. As they were handcuffed, Amanda shouted, You ruined our lives. No, I replied, watching her being put in the back of the FBI van. You ruined your own lives. I just documented it. Michael approached me. Kevin, I don't know how to thank you. After 3 years of thinking I'd never see justice. Don't thank me yet, I said. The investigation will reveal many more victims. You 3 are just the beginning. Thomas looked at the van where Richard and Amanda were being transported. How many other scams did they pull? The FBI believes there have been at least 30 victims in the last 5 years, I replied. In 6 different states. James shook his head sadly. So many people hurt. As the vans drove away, my phone rang. It was Mark. Kevin, I just got a call from the federal prosecutor. Based on the evidence we provided, they're offering a deal to testify against the larger network. Apparently, your father and Amanda were part of a much broader scheme. I looked at the empty parking lot where, minutes earlier, 2 people had tried to extort me. Now there were only tire marks and the echo of justice finally being served. What's the next step? I asked. The next step, Mark replied, is to rebuild the lives they destroyed. As I drove home, a single word echoed in my mind: it's over. But something told me that the real revelations were just beginning. 6 months after the arrest, I received a call from Special Agent Patricia Mills. Richard and Amanda had pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for reduced sentences. Richard got 12 years for federal fraud, extortion, and operating a shell company in multiple states. Amanda received 8 years for relationship fraud and conspiracy. Kevin, Agent Mills said, their case opened up a much larger investigation. We uncovered a network of 53 scammers operating in 16 states. Your meticulous documentation was instrumental in dismantling it all. 53 criminals. Hundreds of victims who would finally see justice because of 2 people who tried to extort me in a mall parking lot. Michael Davidson called me the following week. Kevin, I was able to recover the $15,000 through the Federal Restitution Fund. I'm finally going to ask my girlfriend to marry me. Thomas Reed had recovered his $22,000 and used the money to start a foundation to protect seniors from financial scams. I want to turn my experience into something that protects other people, he said. James Patterson, the widower who had sold his late wife's car, bought a similar classic vehicle and restored it in her memory. It's not the same car, he explained to me, but it carries the same memories. Mark Sullivan organized a party at the office to celebrate the outcome of the case. Kevin, in 20 years of law, I've never seen anyone document evidence so meticulously. You could have been a detective. I laughed. I prefer to use that skill to build businesses, not dismantle families. But the truth was more complex. The experience with Richard and Amanda had changed me profoundly. Not just because I had faced my past, but because I had discovered that my story was not unique. Over the following months, I received hundreds of messages from people who had watched the news coverage of the case. Abandoned children, betrayed siblings, families destroyed by greed. Stories that echoed my own journey. That's when I had an idea. I created a new division at TechFlow, the Digital Family Protection Program. We use artificial intelligence to detect patterns of financial fraud in real time, especially relationship scams and shell companies. It's like an antivirus for human scams, I explained to Carol, my assistant, as we reviewed the pilot project. The program identified suspicious profiles on online dating platforms, cross-referenced data from registered companies with actual financial activity, and alerted banks to attempted family fraud. In 6 months, we had prevented more than 200 scams, protecting potential victims from losing $3 million. My mother visited the office on the day of the program's official launch. At 62, she looked younger and more vibrant than she had in decades. Kevin, she said, watching the investor presentation, your father would be so proud. Father. David Foster. The man who raised me alone, who worked 3 jobs to give me opportunities he never had. Not Richard, who only showed up when he smelled money. Mom, can I ask you something? Have you ever regretted not trying to find Richard when he left? She smiled sadly. Kevin dear, I spent years blaming myself for not being enough to make him stay. Only recently have I understood that some people leave not because something is wrong with you, but because something is wrong with them. That conversation made me realize something fundamental. My revenge against Richard and Amanda had not been about getting money back or proving superiority. It had been about protecting others from going through what I had gone through. On the first anniversary of their imprisonment, I organized a charity event for families affected by fraud. I invited Michael, Thomas, James, and dozens of other victims who had connected through our program. A year ago, I said into the microphone, 2 people showed up at my office trying to extort me. They thought they had found an easy victim. In fact, they found someone who would turn their greed into protection for hundreds of families. The audience applauded, but I continued. What I learned was not that revenge is sweet, but that justice is transformative. When we channel our pain into protection for others, our experience gains meaning beyond our personal story. Thomas stood up. Kevin, your courage in confronting your dysfunctional family inspired many of us to do the same. Michael nodded. My fiancé and I want you to be our best man. You gave us back our future. James wiped his eyes. My wife would have loved to know that her memory helped protect other families. 2 years later, TechFlow was acquired by a digital security corporation for $45 million. I kept 20% of the company and used the rest to expand the family protection program to the national level. Richard and Amanda? I occasionally receive reports about them through the prison system. Richard is participating in a financial rehabilitation program, learning basic construction skills. Amanda completed high school in prison and is studying psychology. Part of me hopes they use this experience to become better people. Not for themselves, but for their potential future victims. As for me, I married Dr. Sarah Chun, a psychologist specializing in family trauma whom I met during a conference on fraud. Ironically, she shares the surname I rejected, but she represents everything a family should be: support, honesty, mutual growth. You know, Sarah told me recently, your story isn't about revenge. It's about turning betrayal into protection. She was right. The most rewarding moment wasn't seeing Richard and Amanda arrested, but receiving a letter from a single mother in Phoenix whose online boyfriend was blocked by our system before he could pull off a $15,000 scam. You saved my daughter's college fund, she wrote. How can I thank you? The answer is simple: by protecting other families in the same way. If this story of turning family betrayal into community protection touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and share it with people who need to know that true family isn't about blood, but about choices. Choices to protect, support, and lift each other up. Today, I run the TechFlow office from a building I bought 5 blocks from where I grew up. Through the window, I can see the old school where I sold candy to help with the bills. The restaurant where I worked washing dishes. The park where I promised myself that one day I would be different. And it is different. Not just because I have money, but because I use my experience to ensure that other children don't have to grow up wondering why they weren't enough to keep a family together. Last week, Amanda wrote to me from prison. A 2-page letter asking for forgiveness, explaining how therapy helped her understand the damage she caused. She mentioned wanting to work with fraud victims when she gets out. I haven't replied yet. Forgiveness is a process, not an event. But I kept the letter. Because even people who hurt us deeply sometimes find their way back to the light. And when that happens, maybe we can build something new from the wreckage of what was broken. Richard never wrote. Maybe that's the forgiveness I need, accepting that some people never change, and that's not a reflection of my worth or my effort. The last I heard, he was working in the prison laundry, learning that honest work, even humble work, has more dignity than any elaborate scheme. Me? Well, I'm building something that will last for generations, a system that protects families before they are broken. And I've discovered that the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you, but building something so strong that future betrayals become impossible. Some endings are about winning. The best ones are about transforming. This is my story of how 2 people who tried to extort me inadvertently helped me find my true purpose, to ensure that no one else has to grow up wondering why their family chose money over love. And that mission? It's just beginning.